What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius and Todd. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, more as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So, come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde, and boy, do we have a special guest today. My main man, Todd Kashdan, is in the house. What's up, Todd?
Hey, good to be here.
Great to have you here. So, Todd, we were talking about this before the show, but, I want to remind the new listeners of this. Greatness Machine, we're about two things. We're about people who are living their passions and those who are creating greatness in the world. And my main man, Todd, here is neither short of passion nor greatness. Welcome to the show, my friend.
I'm so glad I'm in the inner circle of your guys already.
So I was telling Todd, we were on pre-show, and I said, most of the people, if you go back through, we've done, almost 200 episodes, probably 95% of them have been people I know through some part of my life, and I have background on them. But Todd's, you're of the newer breed. We went outside of my comfort zone, and we're like, hey man, we got to go find more awesome people for the show. And so, I was like late night, getting ready to crash, probably watching some, Netflix, and I said, I'll go check out Instagram, and there's a reel that comes up, and I can't remember whose podcast it was, but I see Todd talking about his new book, all about insubordination, and I was like, oh, dude, the Art of Insubordination. This sounds incredible. I got to meet this guy. So I had my team hit you up, and bro, here we are.
I feel the bear hug from afar, and not like a typical guy male script where I'm patting your back and trying to burp you. Like it's a real oxytocin enhanced hug.
Heart to heart, my friend. Yeah. Heart to heart. So for those of you that are not familiar with Todd, I'm going to go through the formal bio for a hot second here. But he's an author, speaker, professor of psychology at George Mason University. I mean, this is a guy that we are going to have a great show with today. Founded the Wellbeing Lab at GMU, produced over 210 peer-reviewed journals and articles, writes the Curious blog on Psychology Today, which is an incredible publication. And you published 5 books, Curious, The Upside of Your Dark Side, Designing Positive Psychology, and your latest book, The Art of Insubordination. Man, you are a busy dude. Like
plus
just getting after
3 daughters. Plus 3 daughters, and 2 of them are twins.
Oh yeah, and I forgot. You and I have something in common. We're both twins.
Oh, are you fraternal or identical?
Thank God Almighty, I'm a fraternal twin because my brother's a fucking maniac. But yeah, you're a twin, isn't that correct?
All right, so I'm a twin, and my brother is a freaking hermit, introverted, quiet, reticent, the exact opposite of me. So that's interesting that your brother is the wild, impulsive one.
Oh, dude. So I'm watching, remember that TV show, or I don't know if you know the TV show. There's a TV show, like a docudrama that came out with about Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee. That was really popular this fall.
Yeah.
Or like in the spring or something. Yeah, dude, I'm watching that. I'm like, God, dude, Tommy Lee reminds me of my brother so much. If that says any, I swear to God, I was like, he reminds, like anyone who knows my brother's like, yeah, Mike's kind of like that. The fucking dude, absolute shit show me.
It is great not to be that person, but fantastic to be on the periphery of a social circle that has one of those characters.
It's funny. People meet me and they're like, your brother is the crazy one. I'm like, dude, I'm the fucking straight one of the two of us. So yeah, dude, I saw that. I forgot that. Last night I was reading that up. So there are a lot of twins in your family, twins in my family, bro. I will tell you, and I don't know if you have this experience, but being a twin is kind of like this thing, like at least for me, like it's a really weird connection to share a birthday with someone for your whole life. There was moments where I hated it. I was like, dude, fuck this. I want my own birthday, But now I appreciate it. It's cool as you age, you get to celebrate with someone else. Did you have any sort of experience like that?
Well, I think, and I'm learning a lot because my twin daughters are now 15. I just dropped them off to sophomore year of high school today. So I'm learning through them having retrospective nightmares of what it was like to be a twin. And one of the hardest things that I see through them and I experience was you really have to carve your own niches. You can't be simulacrums of each other. So it's like, who's going to get the flag for intelligence? Who's going to get it for creativity? Who's going to get it for social popularity, being a raconteur and telling stories, athletics? And we really did that our whole lives. And there was never a flag that we both shared. And I hadn't thought that much until the past few years of how much that's molded my character to really be uniqueness seeking. And it makes sense because here I am studying how to create healthy rebellions, but it fits with a whole lifetime of trying to rebel with my brother and how the rest of the world viewed us as a single entity, and neither one of us would allow that to happen.
Were you guys identical or fraternal?
Fraternal, but check this out. So I have a maxim, which is Mother Nature smokes crack, where we have the same teeth configuration. So our dentist and orthodontist, like they take that mold of your teeth, and ours are exactly the same. So that's one, crack level 1 for Mother Nature. 2, our beauty marks or birthmarks, depending if you're self-loving or self-loathing, what you call them, they are mirror images of each other. So you could see the ones that are on my face. My brother has the mirror image of those. I'll call them beauty marks because I'm in a good mood right now.
Yeah.
And so that's strange. It's just, things that happen in the womb. It's just like, how does that biologically? It makes no sense.
Yeah. So it's funny. It's like, you're like, God's like, I'm going to do all the traits that make people remember you, and I'm going to copy them almost perfectly over here so that it confuses people.
And I'm going to invert it just so that when cannabis becomes legal, you're going to get really into it.
Just the second it becomes legal, not a moment before.
Exactly, for all of our listeners.
Yeah, there's no chance that when it was illegal, we ever considered it as an option.
Nothing but Cheetos and cheese balls.
So, man, is your brother, is he into psychology too, or I would take it he's not?
He is much more hyper intelligent than me, but it's a great example of book smarts versus pragmatics. And I was the one that persevered, that never stopped. He was getting his PhD in economics at George Mason. And then he decided to go what's called all but dissertation. He quit. He just couldn't finish his dissertation. And I'm the one that I just never stopped. So I've never been physically strong in terms of, I'd never learned how to fight. But I was the type of person where I would never stop. So if you were pummeling me at 5 years of age as a bully, you would just have to do it until your hands hurt. Rocky III strategy against Clubber Lang. And it would just go and go, and eventually be like, all right, you're a pretty tough kid, even though you don't know how to fight. I'm going to leave you. I'm impressed. That's if they make a movie of my life, that's the storyline.
Yeah, you have to beat him till he's knocked out. Like there's too much fight in that guy.
Yeah.
So take us to the origin story. You got a twin bro. You're growing up. Did you grow up in Virginia? Where'd you grow up?
No, we grew up in New York, outside of New York City. I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly black. It was about 95% black. And when you're growing up in the 70s and 80s in a lower socioeconomic environment by a single mom, it's a pretty challenging situation. And I've talked to a lot of my friends about, code switching is not race specific. It's basically is, to what degree are you the demographic minority in wherever you live? So if you're a religious person in an atheist community, if you are Jewish in a Mormon community, and for me being, two white twin little twigs that live in a predominantly black community, you learn of what's going to make sure that you stay alive the next day in school, and then what are you really interested in, and then the challenge of figuring out who are you, because you have these multiple identities in terms of the public presentation of yourself, and then that's really underneath the surface of what you're really interested in. And that's a pretty big challenge, and it's made me appreciate the number of people in society who have to pretend to be something they're not, whether it's being gay living in the Middle East or in the Southeast in the United States. You don't have to travel too far. or if it ends up being someone that's religious in the modern world, where you're seeing this slow systematic decline in people that identify with religion or spirituality. And there's a lot of societal trends that are, if you can really harness your origin story, you can really develop a lot more compassion for a lot more people.
So do you think that having grown up in that environment, was that kind of what triggered your interest in well-being? I read somewhere that your mission is to increase the amount of well-being in the world. Like how did that kind of come into play?
Yeah. So who knows what's a nice coherent narrative that I created, but here's the story that I'm sticking to, which I'm not sure is factual, which is that my father walked out on my mom when my brother and I were 2, so I didn't have a father figure growing up. That's a challenge as a boy and a man, of not having a role model of what it means to be a man, and now being a father. So learning by trial and error is the most inefficient way possible, which is why you need podcasts such as The Greatness Machine to help people who don't have access to those mentors. And then my mom passed away when I was 12. And I was raised by my grandmother. And so, again, not having someone 2 generations apart that just could not understand the challenges of, you're trying to figure out, like, what's the script for being in a romantic relationship, and then how do you develop and forge strong friendships, and how do you tell a story where you're funny and playful? How do you kind of seduce teachers so that if you have a C, you can actually get them to move up to a B? How do you get into college by mastering an interview? These are not things that my grandmother could teach me about, or was uninterested, because she already raised 3 kids. And so I learned a lot on my own and through developing a good cohort of friends. And I wanted to do research and write books and write a newsletter to help people that are in a similar situation as me, whether they're being neglected, ignored, or they live in a opportunity poor environment. Can they get access to the resources that can help them in the most efficient and effective way possible, improve the quality of their lives, and also not be an asshole to other people?
Yeah, it's wow. So that's gnarly. And so were you always, I mean, obviously you love to write, or I would assume you love to write given the amount of writing that you produce. Were you always a writer? Like, or is that something that you kind of picked up later in life? How did that come to be?
Yeah, I think I've always been a writer / dissident. So there's a story. I had my 30th high school reunion a couple weeks ago. I didn't go, but people were telling me stories of what I was like. And they were telling me the story that in 5th grade, when we had to read our stories in class, I would put advertisements in my stories of things that I wanted people to get me for my birthday or for Hanukkah man to give me. And so I'd have these kind of strange stories about toys, and they were really perverted and distorted stories that would be in the middle and pause. And then what happened is I would always add characters that were the name of people that I liked in the school in these advertisements in the middle of, this could be like biology class. I'm talking about the Manhattan Project with Oppenheimer, and I've got a story about Skittles and whatchamacallit candy bars that are in there, and I'm putting my friends' names in the story. So it was very interesting, because I'm glad you asked this question. So I'd go to lunch, and then kids would say, "Hey, listen, is there any chance I can get into your advertisement in the next time that you read something in class?" So it's this weird subversive form of popularity, not because of my athleticism, not because of my looks or my sense of humor. It's really because of my writing. And I got reinforced really early. Teachers loved it. They used to crack up and try to hide their laughter. The kids loved it. And then they just made me more of a public performer. And I think that's somewhat of the inroads of kind of, if you get sufficient reinforcement and it ties in with your interests, it's a great, pathway to figure out, like, this is something I should be kind of fitting into my life for the long hood.
I love that. So you're dropping a little bit of a like G.I. Joe inside of the article for class.
Yeah, right. And the story is about my essay is about volcanoes in Iceland. Yeah.
And if you happen to have the Cobra, G.I. Joe, like I would like that for my birthday, wrapped in this type of wrapping paper. So you went to your 30th high school reunion. Hey, I have a question about that. Do you mind if we go there?
Oh, we can go anywhere.
So, I would tell you, being a guy, I saw you on stage, you're kind of jacked. and I read that you like to drink whiskey and you work out purely for steak and whiskey. So I take it that you take care of yourself. But, you know, I went to my 20th high school reunion and I was like, whoa, there was some fucking train wrecks there. I can't imagine the 30th.
Oh, it gets worse. Every decade it's a horror show. It's terrible. I'm not sure where to go with this because I'm definitely not outing anyone by name. All I'm going to say is that in 2022, with the amount of knowledge we know about exercise, and yes, streaming services appeared, the Netflix, the Hulus, and the HBOs, it blows my mind that there are human beings that do not have exercise multiple times per week. It's just, and then when those same people have that, it's been a while since I had one, but those supersized big gulps where you need two hands to hold it. It's kind of like a 96-ounce beer that there's no way to look James Bond-esque and cool standing with one leg against the wall, sipping your 96-ounce big gulp or 96-ounce drink. And
nope.
I still can't get my hands around how people in society don't have this. And again, this is kind of part of my mission. I want to figure out what are the motivational levers to pull for people that effectively kind of gets people to realize, listen, you want to do this because, hey, you want to see your grandkids. You want to go to the Grand Canyon. You want to be able to take 8-hour car trips, which means you need a core because, you know, eventually your back will be so painful. You're only going to be taking, 30-minute car trips to the farmer's market, and that's it. So whatever the motivational levels are, or social comparison, right? If you find that I don't know if this is politically correct, the nerdy kid from your high school is now incredibly fit, attractive, and well off to do, is that upward social comparison the motivational lever for you, or for someone else, is it essentially is that getting the doctor receipt at your annual visit where they tell you that you're physically fit, that professional approval is your motivational lever. And one of the complicated things about science is we figure out what works for the average, but it's really you have to figure out at the individual level,
right?
What are going to be, for some people it's sticks, for some people it's carrots, and figuring it out, is this a lifelong expedition because you'll constantly be meeting new people.
Yeah, I love it. I'd love to hear, but you didn't answer the question. There were some train wrecks there?
Oh my God. And the thing about it is, it's not like you see in the movie. So it's not. So the divorces are often people that are healthy because they made assertive decisions of, I want to improve my life. And the people that actually have really, for lack of a better word, like lame jobs, well, those people, they're working to live, and then they're hanging out in Bali and Indonesia, and they're going to Thailand. So it's just people that are so bland, where they live 2 minutes away from their childhood household, and they're going to the same pizza place, and they're hanging out with the same people, they're having the same conversations, and they're a mess. Like, they haven't seen a dermatologist in 27 years, and you could see skin cancer bubbles on the surface, and they're moving as you're talking to them, and there's just so many. You want to give them a checklist of, there are so many things you need to fix yourself that I'm just going to hand you this list, wish you luck, and I'm going to go back to the bar and get another old fashioned.
Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, it's amazing. You're like, I am on a mission to increase the world's well-being, and the list for you, it's just endless. So I don't know where to begin. I'm going to go do my thing. Oh, man. I appreciate you humoring me on that. When I went to my 20-year, there was a buddy of mine that shows up, and one of my other buddies is like, hey, look who just showed up. And I'm like, is that one of our teachers? And I'm not kidding you. I wasn't just being an asshole. I actually, I was like, was that a 60-year-old man trapped in, or a 8-year-old man trapped in a 60-year-old man's body? Yeah, it was no bueno.
Well, sorry, I apologize because this is a fun conversation. What's interesting to me is people, as you were saying, like people that choose fashion styles and lifestyles that match the adults when we were kids, right? So when you see people with those librarian, like big atrocious, like fake pearls, like big, necklaces, and they've got this kind of like off-color blue purple like outfits that doesn't have, it's basically hiding your body so that not even a chimpanzee or a gorilla would be attracted to you. It's just amazing that people make these choices, and then you just wonder of, what are you reading? What are you listening to? Who's giving you advice? Who are you asking for advice? And does anyone ever give you feedback? And I think it's really important for people to offer you really critical, candid feedback. Maybe this is the New Yorker in me. I get this regularly because people know I've got titanium coated skin, but I love when people tell me what sucks about me, especially in a playful manner. And then I get to sit and ruminate about it and be like, yeah, 80% of the time they're right.
Yeah, I'm like, that's called character, and I have plenty of it. So leave me be. But no, I appreciate that. Honestly, I think, I was working with a coach and a year and a half ago, a really amazing coach, and he was like, "Look, man, a lot of people just want to go to sleep and just exist." And when I see that, I'm like, that person, they're asleep. This is just subsiding. And for me personally, I'm like, yeah, go fill up the bathtub with hot water and grab me a blade, because I'll take myself out before that happens. Like I'm not going to sleep. Like this, you got one life to live. Let's get after it. Let's make it happen. So
yeah. Hey, wait, can I bounce off that one? So this just started interesting me yesterday. So I teach my first class this semester tomorrow, and I've been very interested in benign masochism. So you just mentioned kind of the hot water. And I've been very interested in the idea psychologically of like why we enjoy painful things in transient moments. So scalding water after like being outside, like in your shower or your bath, and there's something about it for a momentary level that you love it. Spicy foods, and then like what, if you ever twist an ankle or like injure your elbow, and you just kind of like putting all of your weight on it just a little bit to see this is so interesting. This really does hurt. So there is like a pleasure about it. You wouldn't advertise to your friends like, let's go injure ourselves and then just poke that injury against a metal fence, but what is that? What is that? What leads human beings to have that realm of pleasure, which no other species has evolved to have that kind of pleasure?
Yeah, I think there was a movie in the 90s where there's this character called the Gimp who's in a box.
Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's a little bit of that S&M, that playfulness, that like love, like the sweet with the sour, right? I do think that there's an element of like, and I actually want to go dive right into this because you're all about curiosity. I think there's a curiosity. Like when you were saying on that, I was like, I don't like pain a little bit, but if I'm like lifting weights or something, that little bit of like, stretching the muscle, but I think like for me, it's around like knowing your limits and like knowing that your body tells you when, right? And that there's I think there's a curiosity around it when it's like when you hurt yourself and you're like, let me see how this feels. Oh man, that hurt a lot. Okay, now I know I don't need to like lean into that 3rd degree burn. I know it really hurt that I just mandolin my pinky half off. So I think it's curiosity. I don't know. I mean, do you think of this as a curiosity thing, or do you think this is something deeper and more entrenched psychologically?
I think there's a few categories. I do think one of them is, as you're describing, it's kind of as if the secret to working out and lifting weights or to run is you have to push your body beyond its limit because your body likes homeostasis. It's miserly. It doesn't want to use any more energy than is possible because there's always the possibility as you walk home from the gym, someone tries to rob you, and your brain has a vigilance center which is always ready for, can something affect your survival? Hey, is there a reproductive chance as you're meeting somebody as you walk out of here? So it saves energy. So one part is a test run in a safe environment of how much can you handle? And then another one is there's this joyous element of you are such a powerful being and you empower yourself by intentionally entering into these painful arenas where you're going to go a little bit dark, but the darkness feels good. And that's something it's not necessarily S&M and B&D. It's an everyday thing. And I wonder at what age those joys start. I know with my 10-year-old, she does not have that pleasure of going anywhere near her injured parts of her body. But so that's,
yeah, I don't think my kids. Yeah, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. Nope, they're not there yet. At least I mean, and but to your point, I think I do think it comes down to like starting to push yourself right in these different ways, right? And I think that every personality is different, and like my mom's a good example. Like I mean, my mom's like a bookworm and nerd and never had any interest in sports, and that just wasn't her deal, right? And so I could never see her like she was not down to go get super sore, whereas I can remember being like young, like I don't know, 9, 10, and playing soccer, and I was like, I'm gonna go fuck that kid up. And I remember knowing I'd fuck them up when I felt them, when I impacted them, right? Hit them. And I was like, all right, now I know that now it's on, right? And I remember attributing, and it was a little pain involved with like body checking somebody. And I remember thinking, oh, I like this. And that, I mean, I ended up becoming D1 athlete, right? So that I think that there's...
no kidding. Wow.
Yeah, so not in soccer. No, wrestling. I was a wrestler, which is and a rugby player, which are both super crazy high impact sports. So I do think that there's a personality aspect of this where it's like some people love that stuff and some people don't. I liked it lifting. Like I lifted like crazy all through like high school and college. And it was like, dude, I would just sit there after being sore and I was like, oh, if I wasn't super sore, it wasn't a good workout, So I wonder if that's, to each their own, right? But I don't think that's a curiosity thing. I think that's a push myself to the limits,
Well, yeah. I mean, there is a question. I mean, thinking of your life successes is training youth to engage in those activities, because there is so much busy work, so much administrative work, so much painful aspects of being an adult, and that aren't pleasurable. There's some degree of these are the training grounds. So the idea of, on the field for rugby, soccer, on the mat for wrestling, is that in these parameters, there are boundaries of how much physical violence and how much you could do to yourself that's socially acceptable. But the notion that for a circumscribed period of time, I can change gears and match my behavior to be as violent as possible to acquire these goals, is to what degree does that have a residual effect where you can violently hold yourself to standards that are seemingly impossible. So when you have to have those 16-hour days to make deadlines, and when you have to make sure you get your taxes done, and you couldn't find, basically, in terms of you couldn't outsource it because nobody was available, so you have to learn it all yourself. These are things that, as a human, we can be more psychologically flexible as an adult if we have these forums to train ourselves when we're younger. And this is why I push all my kids into sports. It doesn't matter how good they are. It's just that you're learning that you can be bored and you can handle strain more than you ever thought you could. And this will be a great gift to you later in life.
I love that. Yeah. And actually I was just going to go there because you talk about harnessing negative, uncomfortable states, to pursue, to become stronger. Right. And so we're talking about that right now. And in your TED talk, I wrote something down and said, that when we pursue what we care about, despite the negative pain, that is where greatness comes from. And that is how we become a better human being. Talk to us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll tell you the emotion that people have the most allergic reaction to in the world, particularly men, which is anger. And it's this notion that we lose control, our relationships will deteriorate, and then we're not going to be able to communicate things in an effective manner. But I argue that anger is often the seed for all civil rights, all improvements in your relationship start from some level of anger. So if you think about it as a speedometer, you've got irritation, and you have anger, you have rage. You can work your way up to get harder, faster, more intense levels. And there's something about if you think about the gay rights liberation movement in the 70s, they don't get to gay marriage in 10 years without righteous indignation, which is high levels of anger. And you don't get to the point of real estate appraisers that decide of if it's a household with a bunch of pictures of a black family versus a white family, you're going to get like a 30 to 40% sometimes reduction in the appraisal of a house. You don't get to reduce that without righteous indignation, anger, rage expressed effectively, and publicly make sure that other people are aware of this. Not for social likability points, because this is an issue that should be addressed. And if you removed anger from the human biological system, you don't get the reduction in tribal warfare that you do in terms of making sure that the minorities, whether it's demographic, whether that's people that don't look like you, whether it's people that don't think like you don't get access to opportunities without a road that's paved with a little bit of anger and a little bit of disappointment and a little bit of sadness that occurs there. And if you are unwilling to express them, you might acquire opportunities, but at a slower speed, because social evolution doesn't move as fast without this emotional residue that is great at persuading other people this is a cause worth fighting for.
Man, I love that. My brain went into two totally different directions. Direction one was, without anger, you get a bunch of folks at our 30th and 20th year high school reunions who we make jokes about later. And with anger, you get, I've been watching The Last Dance, which is Michael Jordan, like the story of the Bulls.
Yeah.
And that dude, he would create fake stories to piss himself off. Like fake, he'd make up shit that didn't happen. He's like, that dude talks shit to me in the game that never talks shit to him, just so he'd get fired up, just so he'd win the next game. And I was watching that and I was like, fuck, man. I mean, first of all, you're like kind of questioning his psychology a little bit. You're like, man, someone needs to hug him more. What's that?
Yeah, right. How messed up is Michael Jordan? Because you don't hear that much in the documentary about his personal life and him being a father.
Dude, they don't even show his wife, I don't think, through the whole thing.
Yeah, which is interesting. Yeah, there was a there's a lot of interesting stories, but one that stands out, Darius, from that gets understated is when he came back from being a baseball player for the White Sox, returned back to the Chicago Bulls, was playing a non-public, non-media event of all professional players, and there was a young guy who just graduated University of Connecticut. And Michael Jordan created this fake narrative that he talked trash of, like, hey, listen, you're too old. You can't keep up with me. I'm the new star. You're the old Michael Jordan. And he needed this adversary. He created this nemesis out of this young 22-year-old kid. And that was the reason that he basically wowed everyone there. And that was the moment people realized, oh, Michael Jordan is ready to come back from baseball and can play with the big boys and play basketball again at the same level. And then his Hall of Fame speech, most people have this real good 30 minutes of gratitude. Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech was all about everyone who dismissed him, disregarded him, and rejected him over his career. And he got a lot of heat. And what I want to do, in this segment here about the value of indignation is argue that if you took away that motivational lever of retaliation and adversarial collaborations from Michael Jordan, you don't get Michael Jordan's greatness.
None.
And it's worth thinking of anyone who is a leader or member of a group. To what degree are you undermining someone's human potential because you want people to be collaborative and kind, but they react well to aggressiveness and adversarial relationships?
Yeah, man. It's when you say it like that, it's like, dude, there is no MJ. This guy changed like the world of basketball. And then in a lot of ways, it's become like this warrior hero for millions and millions of people. If he literally didn't make up crazy shit about himself, about who wronged him, right? I heard that in his Hall of Fame speech, he was like just beating the shit out of his high school coach who didn't make him be varsity when he was 14. The guy's like 50 years old, 60 years old. I don't know how old, he's probably in his late 50s now. He's sitting there talking shit about a guy that wronged him 40 years ago that he has now since proven, undoubtedly, that maybe he was right then, but he was wrong overall. Right. And so I see stuff like that and I'm like, well, I'd love your thoughts on that, but I want to ask a question because I think there's the positive, right? That's the positive. We're talking about like a really good example of a positive that came out of that, or these righteous indignations, like from a civil rights movement, or if you talk about, I think what's Stonewall in like New York with the gay rights movement, like those are righteous indignations. And Michael Jordan created his own righteous indignations that he went then and fought against, right? But psychologically, and I'm a person, you're learning a little bit about me. I'm a fucking crazy motherfucker that sits there and like beats myself up to be better all the time. Like I'll get off the show and I'm like, why did I do that at this moment of the show? And I'll go and try to make it a better show next time. But there's a side of me that's like, dude, just be fucking nice to yourself, And so you talk about, this idea of having, creating distance to create this idea of acceptance, or creating distance so that you can not necessarily be so hard on yourself, but having some curiosity around why am I thinking that? Like if Michael Jordan, I'm happy he didn't have that curiosity, because he probably maybe wouldn't have done what he did. But walk us through that. Like, is it like, yes, you can through righteous indignation create greatness, but how does that also overlay with having some curiosity around why am I feeling this way? If at the end of the day I want well-being.
Yeah, no, Darius, I'm glad you brought this up. So we can think about this as there's a combination of three elements that can improve our quality of life in difficult situations. So we're playing with self-distancing, as you described it. We're talking about diffusing unwanted thoughts, memories, and sensations. And we're talking about a level of self-compassion. So those are the kind of three elements we're kind of merging together here. And then, so there's a number of ways of doing this. One strategy is to separate when we talk to ourselves, and we don't talk to anyone more than ourselves. So what you described after a podcast is me after a pickleball match. Is all I'll do is be like, oh my God, like how can you not angle the paddle? Like why are you always hitting it at full power? Like if you slow it, everyone expects you to hit hard because I have like a lot of meat on my arms. But if I slow this down, how come I can't retain this for freaking when I'm playing the game and only right afterwards? So I could beat myself up. So there's two forms of self-talk. So that form of self-talk we can call brooding, and that is the maladaptive form of self-conversations that happens there. And I'm focusing on why did this happen? What's wrong with me? What's the origin of this? And I'm trying to try to figure this out and be my own therapist in terms of, but I'm not trying to figure out the here and now. I'm not trying to think about what's going to help me in the next game. I'm trying to make sense of this, and that's problematic. The other way of self-talk, we can call it as pondering. And that's basically like this reflective thoughts of like, like what are some ways that I could take away and create closure from this really crappy pickleball game that I just played? Maybe there's some lessons that I can write down. So I can write down, stop moving when someone hits the ball at you and just plant your feet. You have more time than you think, so don't get so anxious with your hand wobbling while you're at the net. Your hand has to be stable because a stable shot is going to be a more controlled shot. So as I'm pondering this, I'm turning this into specific things, lessons learned. I'm still ruminating, but it's adaptive. And actually, one thing that I do is I have this journal that I've been keeping for, I don't know, like 15 years now. It's the three extraordinary moments of each day. Now, they could be really problematic and evil, like some guy cuts me off on the road and we get into an argument on the side of the road. That's an extraordinary moment. It's not ordinary. And I'll write about it. I'll write about also like how I could have handled myself better. And then I can also write about like how entertaining it was to laugh about this with my daughter who's in the car. It was like, oh my God, I've never seen you so angry before. I feel so safe around you. And yet I'm worried you're going to get killed. So I can write all these things down. And after a bad podcast interview, a bad class that I teach, and this bad is my self-assessment, bad pickleball match, I write down what happened and then bring closure to it by, all right, lessons learned for the next one. And if you really think about lessons learned for the next one, that stops the ruminatory cycle that leads you into, downward depressive spirals. It reduces self-loathing. The other element of this, of self-talk is, and this is from Ethan Cross's work in University of Michigan, if we can talk about ourselves in the third person, this is why I like the Extraordinary Moments Journal. I'm writing about myself in the third person. I'm like, Todd could not hit any shots at the net because his hand was shaking back and forth. If only Todd could just slow things down. So there's a distancing that's happening because I'm not saying I should have done this. It would have been better if I did this. I'm talking about there's this guy, Todd, that I'm watching a video of in my head, which is what we're doing. We're watching a retrospective action movie of what happened before. So write it that way. It removes the emotional attachment to it and allows us to kind of think about knowledge, skills, and experiences that are worth retaining in our self-edited life narrative.
Oh, I love that, man. Like just this idea of separating yourself. And this is about, separation from the ego, right? Like, because when I'm in it, then and then there's a rumination and an obsession. Like I got to and then you're just in this spiraling moment. And I love this idea of like putting yourself in the third person because it's like, hey, there's this guy, Darius, who's like whiteboard. I mean, I'm looking at the whiteboard right now of me whiteboarding my, business ideas over the weekend, as opposed to like me being in that business idea and me stuck in what do I want to do and how I could do it better and all these things. So, one of the questions that I would ask you though is, this, I guess what I'm hearing you say is we got to create some space, right? Some psychological space. And it sounds like you use this idea of a journal to do it. What are other ways you recommend for folks that maybe are not great at it? Especially I think people that are achievers. A lot of our listeners are achievers. The reason they're achievers is they're probably like us, where they're like, I'm just going to get after it, right? And when it doesn't go my way, I get fired up and I go fix, right? But that gets to a point. Maybe I'm just in my early mid 40s now, where I'm like, all right, man, I don't want to keep beating myself up when things don't go my way. I want to like learn from it, and I want to naturally create space. I want to have I don't mind getting fired up. I mind getting fired up and being, aggressive with myself. What are some ways that methods maybe that you recommend with clients or to your students around really creating a habit of building space for oneself?
No, this is great. I'll give 3 right off the top of my head. This is great in the workplace because you don't necessarily have time to stop, pivot, and go open up more writing to do for yourself. It sounds like a homework assignment. So 3 things. 1, ask yourself, were there third parties present that provide a perspective that you haven't attended to? So go back to my pickleball game example. I'm playing with 3 other players there. None of them complained about my play. None of them were upset at me. Objectively, we all got, in fact, there was just a ton of laughter and kind of a lot of self-deprecating humor. And so to properly describe that moment in my day is to include their perspectives in there. That's number 1. Because we often are much harder critics of ourselves, especially, your listeners seeking out greatness and maximizing their potential. We are bigger critics than other people. Get those other people into the storyline in terms of if them being a fly on the wall, they saw what you saw. Second one, if you were giving advice to your friend about this exact same situation, what would you do? We are much kinder to our friends. We are amazing. Last night, I went to a brewery with my friend who's about to have 10 hours of brain surgery. He's my age, one of my closest friends from high school, and when I talk to him about an impending surgery where he has a good chance that this might be the last time I see him, I am bleeding with compassion. I'm asking tons of questions. And then I'm also having the difficult conversation of, hey, listen, like to what degree have you planned for if this doesn't work out? And then he's going through it. And the reason that I don't mind having that conversation, and most people find it taboo, is because I know he wants to unearth this. I know he wants to talk and actually see if he's doing this, quote unquote, correctly. Like, how do you tell your kids? How do you tell your romantic partner? How do you make amends with people when you have a date when someone's going to enter your skull and give you brain surgery for doing this?
Right.
And so I'm trying to offer like a gift of like, hey, bounce all this stuff over me, and maybe I'll find maybe I can validate, or maybe I can say, hey, I think a better way of doing this might be this and this. So have that thought of what advice, if this was my friend, what advice would I give them? You'll be more compassionate. The third one that you play is start messing with time perspectives. So think to yourself, well, how am I going to feel and think about this a year from now and 5 years from now? And I have an article that comes out in 3 hours on my Provoked newsletter. It's going to be about the hidden destruction of ostracism in the workplace. And while I'm making the argument that we underestimate the power of people being rejected and ostracized at work, when you do ask yourself, how am I going to feel and think about this 5 years from now? It's going to be one more moment where you were rejected in your life. It's still going to be painful, but your nerve endings won't be exposed the same way. And if you can think about 5 years later, 10 years later, it could just give you enough oomph to stick in a situation and burrow through it until you get home and you could take that hot bath and kind of put your feet in the shiatsu foot massager that goes in there. And sometimes for high performers, all you need is can you last this experience? Because we do have the ability to say, I am aborting now and going home because I don't need to take this much static. You guys are all, and gals are all being pricks to me. And I'm at an age where I'm just going to walk out. I'll see you guys tomorrow. We need more often than not to stay in that situation to realize that things aren't as bad as we think they are. And playing with a time perspective allows us to stick in there and persevere a little bit longer, where maybe there'll be a shift where people will be like, you know what? I feel like we've been too hard on you, Todd, Darius. We've been criticizing your ideas for the last half an hour. It's the murder board. I think this has actually been unhelpful, and this went a little bit too far, and I apologize. If you left at the peak of the highest criticism, you would have missed the mea culpa. Is the mea culpa always appearing? No, but it's worthwhile regularly to create a habit of sticking with the suck, because sometimes people realize they pushed too far, they prodded too far, and time perspective helps you with that.
Oh, I love that, man. This is so good. By the way, I was doing that selfishly for myself, listeners, just so you know.
That makes a good interview. Yeah.
Yeah, screw all you. This is all about me. No, half joking aside, I want to shift over to the new book, man. The Art of Insubordination. Congrats on that, by the way. That's incredible. And like I think it was 2 podcasts ago, I wrote a book called The Core Value Equation, and so I understand, like, dude, writing a book is a lot of fucking work. You know, wow, that's crazy, man. So tell us, tell us about the book. What do you mean by this idea of, because you talk a lot about principled insubordination in the book. What do you mean by this idea of principled insubordination? Tell us where the book, like maybe the idea of where the book came from.
Yeah. So this is pre-Trump. This is pre-COVID. This was the word woke, I don't think, was being used regularly. Definitely not as much as it is now. At the time, there were interesting societal trends. This was when you had the Arab Spring. So, Twitter ends up being this vehicle where you've got people in the Middle East who are able to fight totalitarian regimes by, quickly putting a few characters online and getting into access to, embassies in other countries. So you have that uprising that's happening there. You had, as we talked about before, kind of the decline in religiosity in the country, but nothing's replaced it in terms of what communal events do we have besides concerts and sports events that brings people together of different demographics, of different political ideologies. And then you have the number of people who are no longer staying with a job for more than 10 years, that the average person, when I started writing this book, had 12 jobs during their adult lifehood. This is in their mid-20s to adulthood. And what does that mean psychologically, not just for individuals, but groups, teams, and organizations and societies, when you don't have that economic stability and you don't have that social stability? And then another trend that really affected me was social mobility, where there's a really interesting trend that very few people are talking about, that people are more inclined to move far away from their childhood environments, their families, and live to where the work is. So they're choosing work as the guiding, fitting with the book that you write, as the guiding value and compass for their decision making, as opposed to their social relationships and the other elements of well-being in their lives: physical well-being, spiritual well-being, social well-being. that happens there. And then what does that do to society when people are just roaming around to different areas and the roots aren't strong in terms of a community being able to help you raise your children, and a community to help you figure out what do I care about and where do I belong. And this made me want to write a book where, while the title's meant to be provocative, The Art of Insubordination, and I talk about principled dissenters and principled rebels. To be honest, this book is about how do you create a more utopian society, and then the mechanism of action are individuals who are willing to dissent from mainstream thinking, orthodox approaches, and say, hey, I think we need to pause on this. I think this might be problematic and dysfunctional. And also individuals that say, you know what? I'm going to live a life that's a little bit left of center from everyone else. I'm not harming anyone else's well-being, but I'm being a principled rebel because this way that my family has taught me and that my schooling has taught me is not how I want to live. So you have people that have, they graduated like elite schools like Berkeley or Emory, and then they decided hey, listen, I don't really care about making more than enough money to live and enjoy my weekends. And so I want to open an ice cream parlor. And their parents might have disowned them and felt that they didn't get their money's worth for college. And I'm saying that I have a name for them. I call them niche carvers, that they carved a niche for themselves for it is a rebellion, but it's more personalized that happens there. So it's not always about politics and society. And this is also, if you are a gay man living in the Middle East, or if you are a gay black man that lives in the United States, your culture is strongly, unfortunately, against you. And it takes a little bit of rebellion of, despite the friction and static, I choose this lifestyle because I only have one chance of living my life. And this book is about how people can be empowered and how we need these dissenters, even if we disagree with them.
So the question on that, because I think obviously us talking about it, it's easy, and doing it is fucking hard, right? Yeah. And so, you talk about this idea of rejecting systems and this idea of people, being these dissenters in this way to then, affect change, right? Or whether externally or internally. But, I guess my question for you is, I guess I have two questions. Number one is, how do you do this in a way where it's not painful? And what's the high level thought around that? And then my second question is, how do we also then do it where it doesn't become toxic, right? Because if you go ask the woke left and you go ask the nationalist right, who's right, they're gonna both say, I'm dissenting against the norm, right? Right. And the reality is I look at both those people and I'll get a little political. I'm like, dude, quit fucking shit up, like there's and so yeah, I'll leave it at that.
No, these are great questions. Okay, so the first one is there's really no pain-free way of dissenting. So here's part of the director's cut. None of this is in the book. Is what I call the dissenter's dilemma, which is what is useful for the group and society in terms of you pointing out the dysfunctional, problematic, unhealthy ways is going to lead to detriments in happiness and well-being for the individual, at least in the short term. Nobody, as you're saying, nobody on the margins of the political left, the political right want to hear that they're wrong, especially from people in their tribe. So there's a term that psychologists call the black sheep, which is it is worse to hear criticisms from someone inside your tribe than someone on the outside, because it's like, hey, I thought you were one of us. Why aren't you have uniform beliefs and views, and why aren't you nodding your head and giving a thumbs up to every single thing that we are agree on? You are weaponizing information for the other side, as opposed to, and it's really hard for people inside of groups to realize, is like, listen, I identify so strongly with this group that I'm willing to point out the frailties and take a hit to my well-being because I care about. I don't think that you can actually last in a healthy way as a group if I don't say something. So I've experienced this myself in many ways, but there's much better historical examples. So just think about right now. As we're talking right now, we have a very large climate change bill that's going through the Senate and Congress right now, and President Biden's about to sign it. Well, you have two senators that Democrats hate because they don't automatically give a thumbs up. So you have one from Arizona, one from West Virginia, and there's tons of articles and so much social persecution because these people don't automatically give a thumbs up. They want to hear and listen to the argument because they understand their constituency and they have conflicts of interest. This gets to your second question. But the point is, what I want to argue, based on the science, those two senators that disagree with the other Democrats in the party for these bills, they are doing a service because they're making them think, what are the downstream consequences that we haven't considered as I look through the eyes of people who live in West Virginia and people who live in Arizona that happens there? Best case scenario, you realize your arguments are still solid. They would be good for those people in those two states. Worst case scenario is you have to rethink this. It's like, you know what? I have such a bubble of people that I'm talking to and listening to. I haven't taken a sufficient number of perspectives. And maybe I'm treating this as more time urgent than it needs to when it comes to the environment because it's better to get this right. And there's not a homogenous number of societies in this place called the United States. There are people that live in mountainous environments. There are people that live in desert environments. There are people that live in Utah that have, their largest lakes are shrinking simultaneously. These three small societies cannot easily come into one umbrella. How do you do that so that all these perspectives are considered? That requires a dissenter. The dissenter will suffer immensely. I'm saying this. So I do want to make an argument of it is to be a good group member means saying the things people don't want to hear for the health, the vitality and longevity of the group. And I wish people to have the courage to disagree when it's required and the intelligence to know when and how to do it, which gets to your second question.
So yeah, going down that second question, which is, if we say that, hey, we agree that the formula for best success for group long-term, and I'm a big believer in long-termism. I'm a conscious capitalist, which is all about the long-term capitalistic society and doing what's good, doing great by doing good, right? And so, and we could go into, I don't want to go there, but there's a whole argument around the fact that like Wall Street mentality is the opposite. It's around short-term. Our current political system is built around short-term. We have these systems that incentivize short-term thinking. Right. So if we're going this other direction, which I really appreciate that your book touches on this and is all about this, is that no, we are going to say that, hey, if there is a recipe for long-term best, you got to have a little sprinkle of dissent in there and insubordination, or maybe it's a cupful, I don't know, depending on the situation to get there. But how do we do it in a way that works? Yeah.
So here's two questions the group is going to ask right off the bat, and let's play with the thought experiment because it's you mentioned politics and it's something I've been thinking about, and I agree. It's a very short-term invested system. You have these spirals of 2 years, 4 year intervals where people have to be voted in or be revoted back in again for another term. That's not designed well. It's hard to think of an alternative system, but think about this. Think about the skills that are required in a presidential debate to be effective versus the skills that are required to be a leader if you win and are then the president of the United States. The overlap must be no more than 13% between the two. So you have to be cute, funny, witty, biting, media savvy. This starts from JFK versus Nixon for the first televised debates about this. You have to be good in very quick sound bites, describing things in a simplistic but interesting manner. In the real world, as the president, you're going to have a cabinet of experts and advisors, and so they will help you curate all of the complexities that are in there, and be able to process that information is not the same thing as being in a debate and creating really funny, playful, like interesting advertisements on TV that get your attention. So here's an alternative that a few economists came up with in 2007, which was, as opposed to having these televised debates and these forums where you have 15 people vying to be the candidate for Republicans and vying to be the candidate for Democrats, what if you had some sort of an oligarchy system where you decide who doesn't pass the minimal criteria for intelligence, wisdom, perspective, conflicts of interest, and add a few more variables. So let's cut them out. And now that we have smart, well-meaning people who care about patriotism and society and the vitality and longevity of society and can understand some geopolitical issues and economics, just a little bit, enough so that your advisors, when they talk to you, you could ask good questions. Once we cross the threshold, perhaps, as these economists say, it should be randomized. So as opposed to the most socially attractive person wins, once people meet minimum threshold, you randomize it, and then think of, you would have literally billions of dollars that are spent every election cycle that can now be sifted over into silos for education, for poverty, for environmental reasons, and for thinking about security and safety, military, police, firefighters, librarians, all these things. Reducing the amount of people, the revolving door in the criminal justice system. Billions of dollars if you added this randomization, two-part process that happened there. So the question is, how can I present an idea like that and not be told, you're a freaking fool, you don't understand politics and governance, and what are you talking about? So let me start with just two thoughts here, which I did not do right here, by the way. So if people are listening and saying, listen, this guy's a psychologist, not a political scientist, what the hell is he talking about? Good. If you hate the idea and you think I'm an imbecile right now, that is what dissenters often experience in a group environment. Great, we've just experienced it. So what could I have done to make it more persuasive? There are two questions that a group asks. The first question is, are you one of us? Do you understand the plight of the group that you're trying to represent and improve? So if I led by saying, how much volunteer work that I've done over the course of my life, pro bono work, to help improve the criminal justice system, to improve local political organizations, and I don't have a conflict of interest, and actually devote myself as a consultant for whether it's conservatives or liberals, because I'm just interested in the best ideas, don't really care where the hell it comes from, that would actually potentially persuade you, like, okay, so I can see is that you're relatively low in bias, you're relatively trustworthy, you seem like you're competent, and you've put skin in the game. So I've answered the question of, like, do you understand us? Are you one of us? The second question that people ask is, are you a threat, or are you something that's worthy of curiosity? And this is where a lot of people get this wrong, where they really focus on everything that's problematic and all the dangers that exist, and they don't offer an aspirational vision that people can be like, randomizing who becomes president of the United States sounds stupid, but this whole system is pretty ridiculous right now. Tell me some more about that. Like, how would it work? Like what do you do on week one when you randomly get picked, in terms of, like, how do you introduce yourself to society of, you didn't choose me, we just did dice, and that's the only reason they end up becoming the president. Like, what do you do in that first week? And you can have some amazing collaborative conversations, because I have no idea, but it's interesting to explore these alternatives, because we don't live in a utopian society. There are still kids that are living on the streets, homeless, under the age of 14 in New York City, my home world over there, that happens there. You've got prisoners that are going to come out in the next year, hundreds, thousands of prisoners. And these environments don't involve any education, any workshops, or any training on how to reintegrate into society, but they're coming back. So I understand that you might dislike them because they engage in criminal activity, but they are coming to your hometowns that happen there. So don't you want them to become more virtuous, more skilled, and more educated, so that they're better people than when they came in. I mean, who would say no to that? That happens.
Right.
But we have people that are saying no. So that should open up some questions about this. So pass these tests. To what degree are you someone that understands the group and are a loyal group member? Don't be humble here. Like, reveal all of the things you've done that says, I'm one of you. And then the second one is make it clear is that this might be a short-term strain, but this is not threatening to your livelihood. This is actually going to help you, but you have to spell that out concretely. This is not the place to be abstract about it.
Oh man. So much awesomeness in that whole idea. I mean, I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, is he serious? Like, and I'm like, that's a terrible idea. And then I landed on, dude, we should have it be over a game of backgammon. Like, that's how we're gonna like that's how it's gonna like. It's gonna be like, it's like, hey, like, you guys met like, because you wouldn't have some of the issue you have right now, which is like, hey, should we have two 80-year-olds running against each other? It's like, in no world should that happen, right? Like, no offense to 80-year-olds, but like, I don't want, unless science gets a lot better, I don't want to be considered for a presidency when I'm 80, right? And so, like, there should be some disqualifying, like, characteristics, you know, when it comes to who gets to run the most powerful country on earth. I don't know, maybe, right? And then once you qualify all that, it's like, I love that idea of, hey, like, let's get curious and let's try to, like, do it in a way where it makes sense for the betterment of society, to your point. And I mean, we can, I'm a huge advocate of criminal justice when people get out, right? And like, that's such a good example of, hey, they're coming back to your town, you know, how do you want to support them? How do you want to support, you know, the 14-year-old homeless kids? Because I always tell people, I'm like, hey, listen, I want to know what political party is going to make us the number one in education in the world, have the lowest poverty rates, have the best educated, and the best healthcare. And until we're number one in all those categories, everyone can go fucking pound sand, right? That's how I look at it, right? And so, but to your point, it's like, hey, I have a good idea. And it's a crazy idea to a certain point, but let's just take those resources and pour them in and sell people on the betterment of that crazy idea. That's fantastic. I want to go, because you're talking about this idea of, I guess, dissenting for a bigger cause, right? And I know we're running late on time here, so I just want to end on this one last idea. Is if I'm trying to, let's say I want to make big change happen, and I want to do it with your model of principled insubordination, principled dissent, you know, and you talk about being the living embodiment of that cause. So Darius is the living embodiment of the random president cause, okay, which is fought over a game of backgammon in Iowa, where it all starts, right? And so how does one remain flexible? You know, I'm going to go out there and be this living embodiment. So I want to be flexible to these different, you know, groups, but still have integrity in what I believe, right? I'm going to be flexible to try to win you over, but I still want to maintain that integrity so that I'm not, I guess, sugarcoating myself or bullshitting or diluting that integrity to get what I want done. Because I think that there's real risk of that. If we're going to promote insubordination, is it real insubordination or is it watered down insubordination? And I guess, what are your thoughts about doing that with integrity?
Yeah. So integrity. I mean, so this is not a book about insubordination. It's about principled rebels. So what is that principled part that comes in there? So there's a few things. One is, I have an equation. It's deviance, authenticity, and contribution. That's the numerator of this equation. So it's first recognizing of there is a conflict with the norms that are being espoused by the mainstream right now. So that's the deviance that happens there. So that's kind of an element of recognizing, listen, this is problematic. I'll give a politicized example that will cause some people to love this, some people to hate this. One of the problems that led to all of the mask debates that occurred around the world was when the Center for Disease Control, which is a very evidence-based, data-based organization that we should trust wholeheartedly, they made a horrible, horrible decision when they had racial protests around the country. They publicly stated of like, listen, this is understandable. We support it because the cause is too important. As soon as they said that, it was like you allowed the adversaries of evidence-based thinking to say, wait a second, that makes no sense whatsoever. We're supposed to quarantine, we're supposed to wear masks, but if the cause is good enough and the concert is amazing enough with the best bands possible, then all bets are off. And so that set unnecessary seeds of doubt. And I think we should really deconstruct when we do this problematically and say, let's never do that again. The CDC is not, there's a lot of great organizations that are around how we relate to each other to reduce ageism, sexism, and racism. The CDC is not one of those organizations. So outsource to someplace else, because your job is to reduce pathogens and keep people alive and prevent health problems that happen. That's what you're doing. Like, don't mix and match other systems that happen there. So to be principled, you have to have a contribution part. There has to be, you're doing this because you care about individuals and the group. It's not for likability. It's not to gain status in your tribe that happens there. Those could be offshoots or spandrels. That's the evolutionary term by Stephen Jay Gould, where it's almost like an accident of you approaching how to create a better society where we value scientists a little bit more in the realm where we put athletes on a pedestal. So it's an uphill battle, but for doing this, the question is, would I be doing this because I'm more of a scientist than an athlete? There's a conflict of interest there. So the contribution part for me would be questionable if that was the path that I was pursuing. If it ended up being is that you were concerned about kids being treated as if they are in every racial group, that they are homogenous, a monolithic entity, that every black kid thinks the same, should think the same, has the same political affiliation with liberals and Democrats. That kind of attitude is racist. I mean, if you just go to any dictionary definition, the idea of there can be variability in the thinking and the feeling and the doing if you're white, but not if you're black, that's racist. So by you calling this out is you're against this ism that happens there. Will you get friction, to go back to what we talked about before? Will it be painful for you? Absolutely. You'll be called a racist. But there's something to be said about being, in terms of contribution, you want to reduce the degree to which proxy variables that are not related to excellence and are not related to personality and are not related to work performance are being used as indicators of those things, such as race. Try to reduce that. One of them is raising questions about treating individuals as if they are automatic representatives of their group, and that everyone is actually, there's no variability in how people think, feel, and behave that happens there. So this is something I've been speaking out about, because at a university settings, we treat, as if all black students are kind of this one single thing, but nobody's saying that for white and Middle Eastern students that happen there. They're allowed to deviate in terms of who they are and what their personalities are that happen there. And we have to do the same thing, if you're at the left extreme. Part of the principled element is asking yourselves, by you trying to stop the racial atrocities of the past of being taught in elementary school systems, are you helping or harming kids and society? And I would say that the evidence is very clear that it harms society by not learning from our past mistakes. It's why we learn about the Holocaust. It's why we learn about Christopher Columbus, both the positives and the negatives simultaneously that happens there. It's why we learn about kind of American Indians in terms of how they were displaced, and it's never been kind of rectified today in society. Why would racial atrocities not fall into that category in the first place? Now, where you get to problems is if you treat 2022 as it's the same thing as 1961. And so we have to be able, part of the way of bridging that communication is saying the contribution part is teaching children to discern how society is progressing, maybe not progressing at the trajectory and speed that you want it to, and allowing that degree of critical thinking so that you don't have to say thumbs up or thumbs down. It's, hey, let's take into every individual element of society specifically. So if I have a daughter that's now entering 5th grade, I want her to learn that one of the places in America for the greatest racial disparities is in the criminal justice system, where plea bargains occur and they're offered so that they don't even get due process in the system. More inclined if you're a black person being prosecuted versus a white person being prosecuted. That pivot, that very specific pivot point, is one of the biggest racial differences in society right now. Now, in terms of admissions into a university, especially on the East Coast and West Coast, those racial differences are becoming smaller to almost non-existent that happen there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be honest and say, in this domain, it's still a problem. In this domain, we are over-reporting a problem. Here we're under-reporting a problem, and here we're describing it perfectly. And that's how the education system should operate, as opposed to everything is a problem and everything at the same magnitude. Now you lost potential allies and adherents because you're not being honest and fair about how things operate. And this is part of the principled element of trying to dissent and disagree in these conversations.
Oh man, mic drop moment. I mean, I have a feeling you and I could go on for 2 more hours. This is like I'm just getting started here. But man, we ran out of time. Gosh, Todd, what an amazing conversation, man. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. You know, everything from your work on curiosity to this idea of the art of insubordination, and really being thoughtful around data and being thoughtful around contribution, and how can we as individuals, position ourselves to do that. I'm really excited for the work and where it's going to go. So thank you so much, man, for being on the show. Super appreciate this.
Oh, your energy, your profanity-laden conversations. I mean, this is the stuff I dream of when I'm on a podcast. So thanks for creating this kind of warm, playful, because these they're serious topics, but when you're just hanging out, they should be playful, these conversations.
Yeah, it's the pleasure and the honor is mine. So look, people that want to get the book or learn more about you, or how can they hook up with you? What are the best ways to connect?
Well, I mean, my name, toddkashdan.com. You could sign up for my what is that Substack newsletter, Provoked. Next issue goes out in a couple of minutes on the cost of ostracism. That's free. And then Art of Insubordination is available on Amazon and every bookstore in the country, hopefully. Even a couple airports.
Nice. Guys, go out there, support the book, sign up for Substack for, what's the name of the newsletter again?
Provoked.
Yeah. I can't wait to sign up for that. And man, go support Todd, because the work you're doing is much needed and it's incredible. I really appreciate you, brother.
Hey, same here.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Listen, if you love the show, please support us, share it. The only way this thing grows is by more people learning about it. And talk to you till next time. Peace out. Love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers, and after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind-the-scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and, gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything. But it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.